Please feel free to engage in conversation in the chat. Introduce your name, your role, where you're from, where you're joining us from, and what you're wondering about restorative practices in AI, or what you hope to gain by the end of this session. Okay, I'm gonna get this party started. I'm gonna turn that music off. Let us focus on our conversation. I'm going to start by introducing Ed3's mission, and that'll kick us into conversation about why we're here and what we're doing. So some of you might be familiar with us because you're in our community. Some of you might have seen this shared by other people in your networks. A little about Ed3 DAO. Our mission is to onboard 1 million global educators into the world of emerging tech, no matter what that emerging tech is. Today, our focus is going to be on AI, and the pedagogy we're going to focus on is different kinds of restorative practices and what that means and what the implications are in the world of emerging tech. James, thank you for contributing to the chat. I see that you're wondering what tools you can use to bring teachers beyond the restorative circles to problem solving. Yeah, that's great. I love hearing that. So how can we bring it to problem solving circles level? Great. Tisha, I think we met before. I've seen you and you were in the webinar last year for Ed3 DAO, and you introduced me to a lot of cool stuff about Wakelet. So I love seeing you here and contributing. Welcome, Tisha. So here you're here to listen and learn. Awesome. You're doing customer success at Lumio, former educator, digital learning coach. Excited to learn from you as well, Tisha. Excited to have you here. Okay, let's keep going. So a little bit more about Ed3 DAO. Our work focuses in three different, let's say, lanes, right? Three different categories. One of them you're experiencing today. We offer a lot of free webinars in connection with the emerging tech and pedagogy. And a lot of that is built on the coursework that we have that's offered through our partners in university. And you can take different courses ranging from restorative practices, classroom management, to things like project-based learning in AI or design thinking in AI. There's a whole range of things that you can find on our website and through Idaho State, who's our partner. We also have a global community of practice, which is on Mighty Networks. So if you haven't joined us yet, please feel free to join us there. There are all kinds of practitioners from around the world who engage in a lot of thoughtful and meaningful conversations about how AI is integrated in education and what emerging tech means for us as teachers in our practice. And then the other avenue that we're on is research and development. And we're working on a lot of cool things, whether it has to do with the evolution of the role of the teacher and how emerging tech impacts that, working on competency-based assessments and digital micro-credentialing. So a little bit about us. And as we move forward, there's just a few webinar best practices I wanted to mention here. We really encourage the use of the chat so we can make best use of this time together. Please know that this session is being recorded as we speak, and the use of the mic whenever you're going to partake in conversation, please feel free to unmute yourselves. But as we're going through some content, please make sure you are on mute. And lastly, let's create a safe space together. Let's co-create it and make sure that we can use this as a space to have thoughtful conversation while maintaining respect and kindness towards each other. I see more people in the chat introducing themselves. Delina, welcome. You're joining us from the world of higher ed, and it has to do with disability support. You're here to learn more about AI and restorative practices. Awesome. I'm so excited to have you all here and have this conversation with you. Our title for today's webinar is From Conflict to Connection. So we're going to look to see how we as human beings build our relationships, how we view others and what our lens are, and then question how we want to grow as communities and within those individual relationships. But before we get into the content, there's someone I want to introduce you to who's joining us here from Wakelet, who is a great partner of ours. And we utilize this platform named Wakelet for all of our coursework for our participants to build their portfolios. And I want to introduce Rick to take it from here and tell us a little bit more about what Wakelet is, what we can do there, and what it means for us in our practice.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name's Rick Butterworth. I'm one of the founding members of Wakelet. focusing on product and engineering. And if you're not familiar with Wakelet, it is a content curation platform where you're able to save any digital content online and what you have on your computer into collections that you can organize and personalize to how you want. And the amazing thing with Wakelet is creating your own digital portfolio. So, for example, with the lessons that you're learning through Ed3DAO, being able to collect those resources into individual collections to how you see fit, what best represents how you want to represent that information is something you can do with Wakelet, as many other things, which we can always go through. But the great thing is you have the ability to bookmark and organize, as we've already said. You can go into collaborating, so inviting your fellow teachers or colleagues and collaborating around a particular topic or resource of your choosing. And lastly, being able to then send that to somebody else or presenting it in a classroom or to a group of people. The great thing with Wakelet is we wanted to solve the problem of not having so many links that you're sending out. You just collect in one collection, you have a single link to share. And some of the great things that people have done is from lesson planning to PBL, collaboration with students. Even someone went and created a lost and found collection for their school. So the possibilities are endless with this platform. And I'll pass it right back.
Thank you so much, Rick. Thanks for introducing it. I'll share how we use Wakelet, right, in our courses. The way we describe the use of it is as you're walking through the course and you find tools that later on you want to come back to, or these moments of epiphanies you have, or thoughts like, oh, this will be a great idea to use in the future. We use this as a portfolio of our practice. We think of it as a toolbox on one hand. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Apple. We think of it as a portfolio on one hand, and on the other hand, we're looking at capturing our thoughts and our moments of inspiration as we go through an experience. Actually, I was actually thinking, even in this moment, if you're joining different webinars, how cool would it be to have a whole portfolio of what you want to capture from a webinar and have a collection of that? I think I would totally do that. If I were in the listening kind of role at this point, I'd be like, ooh, that'll be great. Let me capture my ideas here so I can go back to it versus having a bunch of little post-its everywhere or unorganized thoughts and notes. I think this would be a cool way, almost like a online journal, like a portfolio of journal of thoughts and inspirations. I think that would be cool to use as well. Or another one would be like all the AI tools, right? Have like AI and pedagogy portfolio of how there are different kinds of AI tools. I think the uses are endless, really. And actually in the PBL course, we've had a lot of participants sharing how they love having this portfolio feature because they can go back to all their resources quickly. So we had a lot of really good feedback in terms of that as well. Thank you for being here, Rick. Thank you for introducing this special offer to everyone who's on the call. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Okay, as we move forward, I wanted to let everybody know that by the end of the call, I'm going to share a QR code where you can receive a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, and it'll be sent to you within 24 hours. So I'm excited to let everybody know that. In terms of our agenda, my whole goal today is really to break down the conversation about what it means to build meaningful and positive relationships with our learners. And then as we do that, how can we co-create positive environments and climates? The thought behind that is that students' experience of the world of education is us. So when we think about the educational system, at the end of the day, it's them showing up and us showing up every day. And our relationships and the way we spend our time is their definition and experience of the education system. So at the core of it is how we as humans foster those relationships and how we make paths to understand one another. So we'll start from there, and then we'll use that concept and the ideas about the sense of belonging and connect it to how does AI play into helping us foster those relationships, what AI literacy means for us. And then I'll leave some time for Q&A towards the end, right before we end with offering the certificate. So that's what's on the docket for the day. And with that being said, let's get into the core content. Before I get into a little bit of theory, I want you to think about a recent learner's behavior challenge. Think about what your response was, what kind of feelings it evoked for you based on what their behavior was, what you did in that moment, and what you wish you did at the moment to handle it better. You're welcome to share any part of this in the chat if you don't. And I want you to think of this because as I talk about the theory, I want you to think about the behavior of that individual. And then we'll come back to it after we talk a little bit more theory again. Okay. So here's us going into a little bit of theory. I wanted to use this metaphor of the iceberg because we know what we see as a behavior, but today I want to explore what's underneath the behavior. What is influencing people's actions and choices in a classroom? So the tip of the iceberg is the behavior. What we see beneath that are the people's feelings and thoughts, no matter the age, right? Whether no matter they're adolescent or adult, people walk into a room with their own life experiences and bring that to the table and have a different lens for how they experience things. Below that also comes our values, whether that's cultural, family, various community. We bring our cultural understanding and the way we see the world and the things that we value into the classroom as well as we build communities. And at the core of it, the driver is all of the various needs we have. So whether you're thinking about Maslow or about the six needs, what really influences how we show up in our world is our desire to have meaningful relationships, to have a sense of significance, to have a sense of belonging in a space that we enter in our community. We as humans are driven by connection, and we love to be connected to one another and be seen and have and be valued in that community. So that could be a balance of various needs from uncertainty to security to growth to predictability to stimulation. It's really being able to be in a space, be ourselves, and feel that we have value, significance, and meaning in the roles that we play and in the communities that we are in. These concepts are based on a major paper by a few of these educators that have spent many years studying social emotional development and how the brain impacts how we show up in different communities. And so I took this quote from this case study and the work that the Mary Helen Mordino Yang in combination with Linda Darling Hammond and Christina Crone have done. They came to the conclusion that when people in general, as humans, when we feel disconnected or wonderless, we're generally disengaged. So I think this is an important aspect to keep in mind about how we are as humans and how our minds work and how that influences our behavior. If you have a moment, I put the QR code there to the study. They really dig into the adolescent brain and how social emotional well-being is at the core and the beginning point of good learning. Because if our social emotional needs are not taken care of, then we are not ready to learn yet. And so this is the important piece of our conversation. For us to build those meaningful relationships, I think we really need to understand what's underneath the icebergs. And as the facilitators in our room, the advisors, and the people who are helping our learners grow to the next version of themselves, we are the ones who are helping to build those path of belongings. So I want to move into this iceberg analogy and talk about what are the different possible behaviors we might see and what's underneath what are the underlying things below the behavior. One of the first ones, I'm going to cover five major ones, and these are based on the psychology of Alfred Adler and Rudolf Dreikes. They developed this whole system of five major behaviors we see in humans and what the beliefs are of those individuals and what they need from us. So the first one is the tip of the iceberg is demanding undue attention. And so if someone is demanding undue attention, meaning they might be constantly seeking recognition, they might be disrupting class, they might be making different demands. The idea here is that the belief about themselves is they count most when others are noticing them, when they are the center of attention. So the work of Alfred Adler and Rudolf Dreikes help us see that the path to belonging, the way we build that bridge for learners who feel this kind of disengaged, is to involve them, is to notice them and help them feel that they are a part of that classroom, they are a part of that community. The next iceberg we have is striving to overpower. So people who are striving to overpower, the behavior looks something like they're defiant or acting in ways like that are bossy, controlling, or refusing to take direction. Their theory is that this individual feels disempowered. They believe that they can only count or belong if they're the boss. And so the way we can create a path to belonging is to let them help, give them choices, to engage them in moments where they feel like they contribute to the community. The third iceberg is someone who seeks revenge. And this can be interpreted as being disrespected or unsafe. Their behavior looks like striking back, harming, self-harming, holding grudges, lashing out. And the belief is that they will hurt others if they feel hurt. They will get even. They feel like they're not lovable or likable. They feel like they don't matter. They say things like, oh, this is unfair. So these are the common behaviors that they noticed are attributed by individuals who seem like they want revenge on the outside. So the way we can, as educators, build paths to belonging is by validating their feelings and recognizing that they're hurt. The fourth iceberg is the assumed inadequacy. In this, you see a lot of behavior that's withdrawn or discouraged. They avoid participation, they give up easily, they withdraw, and the belief that they have about themselves is they have to do what it takes to be noticed, to get attention, or they'll just give up and not try. They believe that they don't want to see others view them as incapable or inferior, right? And so, what we can do to build a bridge with them to a path of belonging is to not give up on them. And they're looking for us to believe in them and encourage them, to make them know that they are valued in our community. And then the less common, the fifth and last common behavior that they noticed is someone who's looking for special service. Generally, this person acts helpless or they demand special treatment, and they believe that they matter most and they count only when other people are helping them or serving them. And so instead of viewing these behaviors as problems to fix, we can recognize them as calls for connection. And I think that'll help us change our lens of trying to understand an individual's behavior, what that means, and how that impacts our community building and the climate of our classrooms. So a restorative approach shifts the focus from reacting to those behaviors to addressing the underlying needs of those behaviors. And I'm hoping to take this as a core part of our conversation and talk about how empathy-driven interventions rather than punishments are going to be really helpful for us to build those positive communities, having structured support systems that reinforce accountability and lead to how AI-powered reflection tools can help learners reframe their mindset and take ownership. I've even gone as far in real practice to share this concept with my learners and say, what are the feelings that come up for you when you're feeling upset or disconnected or misunderstood? Which of these icebergs do you identify with? What speaks to you? And it really opened up the doors for having conversations to be self-aware and reflect on their own behaviors. And then we felt connected because I was someone who was empathizing with them and I was seeking to understand where they were coming from. So I find this theory very helpful because it's not just concept, it's based on how humans behave and how we can build those bridges and help people feel involved and have a sense of belonging. For a deeper dive, I did add the key components of how this could make us feel when we're experiencing somebody else's behavior and what those feelings mean and how they connect to the iceberg theory. So if you decide to take this course that we have, you'll actually get to unfold it to deeper levels as human beings, what kind of feelings are associated with this, and then how we can repair it by understanding and empathizing what other people are going to. By understanding these mistaken approaches to belonging, we can respond to strategies that help learners feel valued, capable, and connected in our classroom, not just managed. And that's my hope of sharing this theory with everybody. That it's not just about management, it's about what is the climate, what is the classroom environment that we're co-creating together and honoring each person's experiences and a sense of belonging. So with that being said, I want you to think back to the student I asked you to think about, what their behavior was, and ask yourself this question: how did exploring the paths to belonging enhance your empathy and understanding of the learner's experience? Recall that behavior. Take a second to reflect to yourself, whether you want to reflect in the chat, unmute yourselves, or think to yourselves. Think about how this can begin to build relationships that are where every person feels valued, right? And how going through those paths of belonging helped us build a sense of empathy towards the individuals we observe with those behaviors. Is there anyone who would like to unmute themselves or at this point pause and have a conversation about this topic before we move on to what AI can do for us in terms of restorative practices? All right, so we'll keep moving forward. And then to take us into the conversation about AI, which is building on this concept of building paths to belonging, I want to see some engagement through thumbs up and thumbs downs. I have this other wonder for everyone, and I want you to show me with a thumbs up if you think it's true, or a thumbs down if you think it's false. What do you think about this question? Can generative AI help us cultivate a positive classroom culture? What do we think? Thumbs up for true, thumbs down for false. I see a thumbs up. I see more thumbs up. Awesome. All right. Anyone that's like thumbs down, like AI cannot help us? Okay, not yet. Okay, all right. I'm excited to talk more about what AI can do for us. And I'm going to share a few of the concepts that we embedded in the course and see what you all have to say about it or think about it. And maybe these are some things you can put into practice as soon as tomorrow. So building on the path to belonging, I actually went ahead and took this whole concept I just presented and built a chatbot on it using Chip AI. Why did I do this? Why did I think that this would be a good way to have this conversation? So I thought, okay, if this theory is really helping me understand how to build positive relationships in my classroom or restorative practices by understanding the human being and empathizing from about where they're coming from, what if I could build a chatbot with those parameters who has a strong understanding of the paths of belonging? So I took all the research by the two psychologists and I entered it into the system and I built this chatbot that would ask teachers, or if you want to use this with learners over the age of 13, you're the one who defined the parameters. So, it's great to have that kind of security where you know what the capabilities are and what the bot is going to do in interactions with your learners. But I found it super helpful. So imagine if you're like, okay, there are these 5 behaviors, and can they be combined? Are there moments or opportunities where we see them being vengeful and wanting attention? What do I do there? So imagine having this AI thought partner that knows the theory and understands it, and has a conversation with us of what these combination of behaviors mean. I actually found it to be very helpful because I put myself in the context of an educator I was thinking of old behaviors I had seen in the classroom. And I started to converse with them and say, I'm having trouble with the student, they're not paying attention, or every other sentence they're interrupting me. Help me, what do I do? And the chatbot it was like, oh, this sounds like maybe this, what you can do is notice this person. And immediately I saw that it was building from the content from the paths of belonging. So whether we're using it as an adult, as an educator who wants to understand where these underlying behaviors are coming from and build possible bridges, or we actually want our learners to use this chatbot and have more self-awareness and practice in engaging in meaningful dialogue, whether it's with us or their peers in an advisory setting. This can help them find the words for their conversation, right? Because sometimes we might have feelings that we ourselves don't understand. I don't know where it's coming from, this feeling. I also want to seek to understand why I'm feeling upset about this situation. And I thought this chatbot would be a good starting point if we're having a hard time figuring that out, or if we need a thought partner that's going to help us find more information of strategies. Another cool thing it did is after it identified the misinterpreted behavior, then it gave me a series of things I can possibly do to fix the situation. Whether that's having an open and honest conversation in a safe space, having a courageous conversation, and it gave a good list of possible ways to repair things and make it right. So that's one possible way we can use AI, right? We define the parameters, and Chip AI is a free app, and I actually built this with no kind of payment or premium payment. For those of you who use ChatGPT Premium, I know you can also build chatbots there as well, like a custom chatbot. The reason why I didn't put the example here is because I wanted to choose things that had freemiums. So I wanted to make sure that I'm giving you tools that you don't necessarily have to have a budget for. So I use Chip AI instead. So that's one idea. Another one, and I don't know if you're familiar with Spaces AI yet. So I actually went into Spaces AI, which has this cool feature of pre-existing chatbots or chatbots you can create. And I researched restorative and I said, what different kinds of restorative chatbots are there? Some of them are actually designed by other educators and they put the parameters. Or if you're like, you want to have control over what the conversation is, you can actually create your own as well. And I thought this would be a good alternate just in case you're like, I don't know if I want to create my own chatbot. I've never done that before. Though I do want to encourage everybody that like initially it felt something not scary, but I was like, can I do that? I don't know how to code. I'm not a tech person. I don't build this stuff. I'm an educator. I do pedagogy. That's where I'm coming from. And I have to admit that it was way easier than I made it in my mind. So, if you're ever worried about things like security and privacy, and even though there are a lot of AIs that do that well, like Perplexity or Notebook LM, like they have really thoughtfully thought about how adolescents use these different AIs and made sure that it has better or more security settings. I think ultimately, what's one of the things that makes me feel comfortable using AI with people over the age of 13, and I keep saying that because that's where we're talking about like COPA and people's access to this kind of technology and protecting privacy. So that's why I keep saying the age 13, if you're wondering. But I feel like if I'm the one creating it, I have more control over it. I can tweak it. I can go tell it. I can go back into the programming of what I asked it to do and add more elements to it. So if you're ever concerned about those kinds of things when it comes to privacy and security, you can totally build one yourself, or you can start with Spaces AI, check out what already exists for restorative justice practices, and you can see that in this video that I have ongoing where I did the demo, there are a lot of different bots that already exist for restorative practices. Then you can try building one yourselves on Chip AI or whatever other AI that you decide to use. But I thought this was another cool way to check out what other educators are doing, what else is available, and integrate that theory and concept of the paths of belonging into having restorative conversations. Okay. Yeah, that's correct, Jason. It is. It's School AI Spaces. Oh, thank you, Jason, for taking care of that. I didn't add the school AI Spaces part. I appreciate that. All right. Next, to take us into more ideas about building positive classroom climates and restorative practices, I wanted to pause from AI for a second and talk about what that means and what the different aspects are that we need to consider. A positive classroom culture is built with learners, not just for learners, right? And I want to take a moment to just stop and say this is one of the central, most important factors in building that environment is building it with your learners, right? That's where they get to take ownership, have a sense of agency, take a sense of accountability. So it's not things that we're telling our learners to do. We're saying, how can we create an environment where everyone is seen, everyone is heard, everyone has a sense of belonging? And what does it take to build that environment? How do we foster safety? How do we foster belonging? How do we foster spaces where learners feel safe to engage? And as I kept asking myself those questions throughout 2 decades of being in the classroom and in schools, co-creation seems to be a central theme that comes up for me, because this way we're co-creating routines and we're co-creating expectations, right? It's not the thing that we are telling people to do. We're saying, what is the best way we can show up here? Who are we here as a community? How do we treat each other? What are our values? What's important to us? And that way, we're able to strengthen those relationships through trust, through empathy, through collaboration, and build that kind of safe environment for everyone. So I think having restorative practices like listening circles or reflective conversations, those are really helpful, and engaging learners in developing the routine of what that looks like, so that when it's time and there is a misunderstanding, how can we go back to a resource we co-created where we do active listening? What does active listening look like for us? And how do we define that? When conflicts arise, how do we have conversations? What do we ask? And I think having them a part of creating these routines is super important, because we're showing them that their opinion matters, that they have a voice, they have choice, and we trust them. And I think that helps to create those relationships, because now they feel like they're trusted, right? And they have a sense of agency. And the classroom is theirs, not just ours. It's not a one-directional relationship. Okay, what are some other things I wanted to mention? So I also wanted to talk about how we can integrate, embed SEL into daily routines to support learners' social emotional needs. So I think another cool way, which I'm going to show how to think about routines and classroom workflows a little bit later with AI. But I think every part of our day and our experience that we have with our learners, we really got to think about what their role is and how we want them to show up in those different moments. I think I want to move to the next part. I feel like I made a pretty strong point here, focusing on co-creating a thriving classroom culture, but it really comes down to building that relationship together. How do we do things? Who are we? What are our routines? What are our workflows? Because those very behaviors, those very habits, let's call them, in a classroom, is what continually builds the climate of that classroom. It's just like when you're building a garden, you got to make sure you're watering the garden, the sunlight is there, right? And you have to follow what you know about what the need of each of those plants are to create a thriving garden. And so for us in the classroom, we have to understand the needs of our learners and engage them in the whole process and co-create with them. So I want to share a little anecdote. I was a part of creating a few different schools. And so one of the schools I was a part of creating, I have the ninth graders do a designing school challenge. And it was a project-based learning school. So I actually had them design their whole high school experience. And the place that I started, which a lot of them feel excited about, is actually setting up the classroom. What does our classroom look like? What kind of stations do we have? What are the norms in our room? And it was quite fascinating, all the different things they came up with, whether it's having like a calm corner, a connection corner, and they would come up with all these different kind of station ideas in addition to what kind of high school experience they wanted. And I found it so rewarding to engage them in this conversation, because I got to see what mattered to them. And they would show up to that classroom and protect it. Like I had never seen something like that before. Like they created their classroom, they added LED lights, they had each of the corners had a different theme to it, and they would keep that classroom so organized because they're the ones who actually got to design it. And so I thought this would be great to talk about how we even set that environment. And AI is a tool that's super helpful because it helps them have conversations like, what kind of classroom setups are there? right? And so what I did is when I entered that conversation into a large language model, it gave me like this whole list of horseshoe model, circle, having different stations, the U shape. And eventually we had this whole conversation with the students and they decided what kind of room that they wanted to have. So I think the step number one to really setting up that climate is giving them their voice and choice in how they create that environment for themselves. And then move into things like traditions and routines and workflows, including things like learner-led boards or like choice boards of different ways they can engage in activities. You might be asking yourself, what does this have to do with social emotional learning and restorative practices? And it's really that piece about a sense of belonging. This is their classroom. This is their community. We are owning it together as a team. And so whenever we put these practices in place, it drastically reduces behavior issues because it's not like an authoritarian way. It's more of an inclusive way of building culture and building in that mattered to them. And that's what I observed in my practice. So I want to share a cool research tool that I thought was interesting in starting out conversations with students. And it's called Stanford Storm AI. I don't know if anyone's familiar with this yet, but I've been finding it super interesting because it researches all the internet. And let's say there's a topic you want. Here I said I want educators to see how we can use AI to generate ideas for developing learner-centered routines and workflows. So it scours the internet and it builds a whole article. It doesn't just write what the content is, but it also gives citations that you can click on and verify where the information's coming from. It breaks it down on the left side. You can see into different categories of what the thinking process is. It summarizes the whole idea. And this can be used as a beginning of that conversation with learners. So if we have our learners engage with Stanford Storm AI, each of them like bring different articles and we start a brainstorming process. What are some important routines that we think is cool that we want to incorporate? What are some workflows that you found online that were interesting? And then that helps us cater that conversation and figure out what are the things we want to try in our community. So here I opened up the section where it does citations, and I wanted you to see how it does the references. So then you can actually check the resources and also engage with our learners about those critical thinking skills of double checking information, making sure that it's reliable information, making sure it's true, right? All of those skills they're practicing on the side in addition to just getting information. I encourage the use of this. I've been finding it super helpful lately. If you don't want to use it, I think a good alternative would be Perplexity. But I did appreciate these features of like how it laid out the article and how I was able to access all of those citations and resources. Then another idea is whenever you do have these articles, a cool follow-up with AI would be to create a mind map of that. So you can go into ChatGPT and say, read these articles and create a mind map for me. So if you go into ChatGPT, one of the explore options is a thing called whimsical diagrams. And you enter all the articles you wanted to read, and then it can create an actual mind map for you. So strategies to get to know your students, classroom activities for rapport, building community and belonging, strengthening student-teacher bonds. And then this way we have a visual way of seeing what the conversation is about and as a community, choosing the different practices we want to explore and what that means for us in our practice. Another cool tool I've been enjoying is creating my own simulations. This one is a conversation feature where I'm practicing how to have discussions with my students. So let's say I have a student who is struggling. This simulator actually would help me have conversations about how I can support this learner. What is it that they're struggling with before I actually go have that conversation with the learner? So I think it's really good practice to see, and get into the shoes of the learner and understand where they're coming from and what they might need help with. And there's like different things I put in there. I put Stephen Covey's 7 techniques for empathic listening because I want to practice how to be an empathic listener. And I also want my simulator to have that as well as I have a conversation. And I use that framework to create the simulator. This is just the process of how I went through to make it. But this is like the next level. I was thinking to have a variety of different like AI access, whether you have used AI or you've never used AI. I wanted to give a little bit from each corner of the room, someone who's never used AI, a beginner AI usage, a little bit more advanced. So I wanted to have a little bit of a variety of the tools that I was suggesting today. So check that out. I do not know how to code. It's doing all that work for me. That's great. Thank you, AI. I'm really grateful. And then it creates this whole sentiment analyzer. So then I get to understand the feelings and the emotions of the learner based on the words that they're telling me. Yeah, and then the final one I'm going to share with us as far as the demo goes. And I like doing these like screen recordings because I want to show what the process is like. So you're not like, I don't know how to do that or what is that like? I want to show you how like the flow was and how easy it was. So this is my latest and most favorite tool. I've been obsessed with this lately. And I know there's so many tools out there, but it's really about what we need in our classrooms and how can we utilize what's out there. I really love this coaching aspect. So what I did here is I presented to the AI. Then the AI asked me a bunch of questions. And afterwards, at the very end, it gave me a bunch of data. So this is Udly AI. And it started to tell me my strengths. I'm enthusiastic. Great. My growth areas, right? I need to have a little bit more clarity and structure. So basically, what I presented on is that everyone should use Udly. That was my whole thing. I was pitching it to itself. And it gave me all this information about what are the things I need to do to improve my communication skills, how I can make my presentation tighter and more efficient. It even talks about demeanor, as you can see, right? So it counted all the things of the ums and my pauses and how I can have more clarity when I speak and be more concise. But of course, I've been in education for a while now, so I always have to pause on my pedantic nature. Sometimes I over narrate. You got a historian and a teacher, and that combined is someone who loves telling stories. So it definitely catches on to my nature of storytelling and says, okay, be a little bit more concise, Armina, when you're presenting a topic like this. So how can we use this in the classroom? How can we use this for restorative practices, right? Imagine when students have to have difficult conversations and they can have a live coach practice with them how to have that difficult conversation. Yes, you can definitely use this in other pedagogies, right? So in PBL, when I talk about the source, I say you can use this for a project pitch. In design thinking, I say you can use this to talk about the most viable product. I've even talked about seniors using it for interviews and even teachers who are in higher ed and they're working on a thesis. You can present your thesis and get some feedback. There are so many ways you can utilize an AI coach like this, but in terms of social emotional learning, I think it's a pretty helpful way to help us practice having those conversations. So imagine if you had stations in your advisory and the topic was how do we have difficult conversations? You as a classroom, right? Let's say a day or a session before, you decided, okay, here's the framework of how we in this classroom have a difficult conversation. Then you feed that into the AI, right? Whether you choose a large language model or you create a simulator, right? Wherever your comfort level is, you have a station where people are working with the large language model to figure out the words that they want to say. And then they go to the next station where you have a coach AI and they actually practice that conversation starters with the actual AI and get feedback. Then you're the last station. They come to you and they say, okay, I'm ready to have this conversation, and here's me practicing how to have that. And you give them that final push in the real life coaching. Before they even get to you, they've already practiced a couple times in different kinds of ways. So we help them get to that next level of communication skills. Yeah, so let's go back to that question, which pretty much everybody said thumbs up to or didn't reply, but I didn't see any thumbs downs. What do we think? Can generative AI help us cultivate a positive classroom culture? What do we think? Thumbs up is a yes, thumbs up is a no. I'm seeing a thumbs up, seeing another one. All right. Cool. Okay. Let's bring this to the next section. I wanted to talk a little bit about AI literacy, right? The message I'm trying to get across and I want to communicate and what's in my mind is that when I think of AI and when we think of AI together at 3DAO, for us, it's not just about saving time or the next tool or the next like branding thing. It's really about creating meaningful learning experiences and using AI in terms of thinking of pedagogy, how we design learning experiences, and then how we design experiences where learners use the AI as well. So it's really about critical thinking. It's about different use cases. It's about cognitive capacities and thinking through what AI literacy is. So Reedy, our CEO, created this AI literacy competency list that you can get. I put the link there. It's on our website. And it's divided into 5 categories from UNESCO. And we as a community think needs to be added to that list. And as we have conversations about AI literacy, what does that mean for our practice? So I wanted to give that tool there as well for people to use when we're thinking of AI literacy, how you're incorporating it in your classroom. Because sometimes I feel like I'm still looking for the language, right? Like I'm this AI experimenter and I'm still looking for the language of what that means in my practice as an educator beyond a brand name, beyond creating worksheets. Like, how do we really take this amazing opportunity of what technology has to offer us and help us create these really exciting, engaging learning experiences? Think about our roles as educators and what's that evolving into, and prepare kids for the future they're about to enter into. Yeah, those are my 2 cents there. And now I'm going to back off. I'm going to take a back seat. I'm going to ask for everyone to contribute to the conversation. Feel free to unmute or participate in the chat and answer this question. I used to think blank, now I think blank. And then we'll move into Q&A. If there are any questions or if you just want to chat, I wanted to just put some time aside for that as well. But I'm curious to know, what did you used to think? Now, what do you think that we've gone through the iceberg model together and some cool tools for you to try?